JD, JD Vance. Jay, what are you doing? I mean, what are you doing? I looked at this interview and I'm gonna look at it again because it's a lot to unpack. There's a lot going on. I kind of skimmed through it at first, but it's making me want to ask the main question. Based on what's in this interview, are you really a conservative? Or how conservative are you? What are your secrets? We all have them. Some are bigger than others. But it seemed like you hiding something real, real big, sir. Or maybe you've had a change of heart. Let's figure it out. I want to react to this video where they interviewed a classmate of JD Vance. It's a transgender classmate of his who was a woman that transitioned into being a male. Forgive me if I'm saying that wrong. The LGBTQ plus community is complicated. I think we can all agree on that. Whether you like it, don't like it, hate it, in favor of it, or a part of it, it's complicated. And so it doesn't matter if I agree with it or not. I try not to be disrespectful to it because I understand there's so much to it that I just frankly don't get. So I want to be careful in using the correct term, saying transferred or transitioned into it, because I really don't know how that works. But what I do know is it's a serious thing. It's very important to people who go through that process. And in this interview, apparently one of JD Vance's old friends was a female and is now a male, a prosecuting attorney, and used to know him and used to be friends with him. And so he's saying that JD Vance's stance has changed and they was really, really close, and she barely recognized who this person is. At least that's what I gathered from it. I want to know what you gathered from it. I think this is going to spark a real good conversation on understanding what's really going on. Because I don't get it, JD. And as the vice president pick for Donald Trump, it's very important what your stances are on this, because conservatives really feel some kind of way about these issues. And there's a lot of hot buttons with it. So anyway, let's get into it. I'm talking too much about it.
Sophia Nelson, Vance's former Yale classmate and a close friend. And this is Sophia's first national television interview and an Outfront exclusive. Sophia, I really appreciate your taking the time here to share these things. And I know that, you took a lot of thought to decide to do this. You and JD Vance, of course, were friends, close friends. So I understand you're a transgender public defender in Detroit. Vance now is one of the Republican Party's staunchest culture warriors. So when you look at what you're seeing now, Sophia, JD Vance running as Trump's vice president, do you see any of the same person that you knew in law school?
First of all, thanks for having me tonight, Aaron. No, I don't see any of the man that I got to know and care about. It's really heartbreaking to see him become so callous and divisive.
So I want to go to some of these emails that we're grateful you shared. I think it's important for people to understand, Sophia, who he is and who he was. So one of your emails from him, this never before published, Vance says in November of 2016, and I quote, "I really see the racially offensive views of Trump's supporters, not all of them, of course, but it's certainly disproportionate, as coexisting rather than driving his support." I guess let me just ask the question to you this way, Sophia, then, because this is an email and you had many conversations with him. Did Vance believe that Donald Trump himself was racist?
My understanding is that he certainly did, yes.
And so, do you recall any of the conversations you had, the two of you, on topics like that?
I mean, in a series of emails that I've shared with you, he's called Trump morally reprehensible, a very bad man. And he indicated that he wishes Trump would tone down the racism. That all indicates to me that Vance was well aware that Trump trafficked in racism, and that certainly not all, I agree with JD there, not all of the people that voted for Donald Trump are racist. I know that, certainly there are many people who voted for Barack Obama and then voted for Donald Trump. However, there is extreme undertones of prejudice, racism, transphobia, homophobia, Islamophobia that drive the MAGA movement, and is now something that J.D. Vance himself is trafficking in.
See, and this is where it gets real complicated with a lot of this political stuff. You got what people really feel deep down, then you got what people have been through in the immediate time that's got them emotional about stuff. And then you got the base that the people are playing to in order to get them popularity and votes and so forth. And so you really never know what these people think. You know, with the J.D. Vance thing and even with Trump, I don't really deep down believe that Trump is a racist. I don't know about J.D. Vance, but here where I'm going with this. I don't deep down believe that, but I do believe that there are a lot of people, not all, but there are a lot of people who do support Trump, who are racist or homophobic and all of that, that Trump knows that he has to cater to them in some kind of way in order to gain their support and gain their votes. Just like, for example, Trump may not own a gun and have never shot a gun before. We don't know, but we know he has to cater to gun enthusiasts on some level. You know, he may not have ever done whatever. You know, the list goes on. And that's what I mean by there's three sides to it. It's like, what do they really feel? Because we'll never know that about any candidate ever. And then what are they going through? It may be a traumatic moment that may happen or something that may happen to make them feel like, okay, I was looking at it this way, now I'm looking at it that way because this was an experience I never had before until now, and it swayed my views. And then you got the people who feel one way, which is totally different, never been through a situation, but they know people who they want to vote for them and support them feel these kind of ways, have been through these things, and they want to garner their support for whatever their purpose is. And that's what gets so messed up about the political stuff, because you don't know how these people really feeling, what they really thinking. It makes you think a lot of them is just playing. And that's why so many people feel like politicians are liars and thieves and so forth. Anyway, let me get back into it.
And I want to ask you about some of that in a moment. First, though, on the issue of race, I know that Vance expressed to you an openness on the issue of reparations, which obviously is anathema to the Trump position, the MAGA position. He also expressed to you sympathy for the Black Lives Matter movement. And in one exchange with you in these emails you shared with us, Sophia, he was reacting to the killing of Michael Brown, the 18-year-old Black man who was shot by a white police officer in Ferguson, Missouri. So this is an email all the way back from 2014, October. Vance writes you, quote, "I hate the police. Given the number of negative experiences I've had in the past few years, I can't imagine what a Black guy goes through." And we just heard a moment ago Vance call police our protectors, and we back the blue in this country. But Sophia, for you, how passionate was he on the issue of police bias and brutality?
And see, that's the thing too. It seems like JD flip-flops a lot. The question is, did he feel this way before, and then in order to advance his career, he saw an opportunity to become vice president and just jumped out there? Because there's been a lot of talks about how Trump at one point was Democrat, but he saw an opportunity to run with a base. So you just never know how these guys feel.
I mean, at the time, I believe JD was genuine in the email that you just quoted, and it certainly reflects my experience as a public defender here in Detroit. I watch body-worn camera every day and represent people who the police treat with callous disregard and excessive force. And I think it's a huge problem in this country, and we see it regularly. A young woman was just murdered in her own home. There's been rallies around that recently. I knew JD to be a genuine, thoughtful person who was compassionate towards people who were different from him. And that email, I believed at the time, genuinely reflected his views.
So let me ask you about this, because when you talk about the kind of person that you believed him to be, we did reach out to Vance's office for a comment on your decision to publicly share your correspondence with him, with us. And here's what a spokesperson for Vance says, Sophia. They say, quote, "It's unfortunate this individual chose to leak decade-old private conversations between friends. Senator Vance values his friendships with individuals across the political spectrum. He has been open about the fact that some of his views from a decade ago began to change after becoming a dad and starting a family. And he's..."
See, that's what I meant. Sometimes your views will change because of a situation that you go through and realize, wait a minute, it's not quite how I thought.
Thoroughly explained why he changed his mind on President Trump. Despite their disagreements, Senator Vance cares for Sophia and wishes Sophia the very best. Now, I want to ask you about that last sentence in just a moment, Sophia, if I may. But first, what he's saying here is that these issues, of which we've touched on some, from reparations to the police to racism, that this all changed because he had a family, because he became a dad. Do you think that that could be the case?
I mean, I don't live in JD Vance's head, obviously, but what I've seen is a chameleon, someone who is able to change their positions and their values depending on what will amass them political power and wealth. And I think that's really unfortunate because it reflects a lack of integrity. This isn't someone who evolved on one or two issues and with new information. This is someone who has changed their opinion on literally every imaginable issue that affects everyday Americans in this country, and changed the way they speak about people. So the JD Vance that I was friends with for over a decade was compassionate, and we've frequently disagreed. That's reflected in the emails, but he always approached conversations with respect and kindness, which I think is so essential. And what we've seen with Donald Trump is a callousness and a cruelty in the way he talks about people, a bullying, right? He's a bully and he calls people names. And when JD decided to run for the Senate in 2022, he started adopting that similar persona, so anathema to who he used to be. And it's reflected in his Twitter. It's obviously reflected in the cat lady's comment. And it was reflected in our interpersonal communications and the end of our friendship. He just started talking in this divisive, dismissive, and cruel way about people who were different from him. And that is just not the person that I used to know.
So I want to ask you about that. First, I just want to say he wrote about you. He did feel a deep connection with you. I just want to emphasize, you're talking about a 10-year friendship. 10 years is a long time to have a deep friendship with a person. You would think you know them well. He wrote about you, Sophia, in Hillbilly Elegy. He says, he's talking about a class, and he says, one of those classes, a constitutional law seminar of 16 students, became a kind of family for me. We called ourselves the Island of Misfit Toys, as there was no real unifying force to our team. A conservative hillbilly from Appalachia, the super smart daughter of Indian immigrants, a Black Canadian with decades worth of street smarts, a neuroscientist from Phoenix, an aspiring civil rights attorney born a few minutes from Yale's campus, and an extremely progressive lesbian with a fantastic sense of humor, among others. But we became excellent friends. Now, just to be clear here, Sophia, the last friend he describes is you. All right? He describes you as the extremely progressive lesbian. And a day after his book is published, he writes to you. He calls you Sophs, which I guess was his nickname for you, and apologizes for referring to you in that way. And he goes on to say, I recognize this may not accurately reflect how you think of yourself. And for that, I'm really sorry. I hope you recognize that the description came from a place of ignorance when I first started writing years ago. I hope you're not offended, but if you are, I'm sorry. Love you, JD.
It seems like they were pretty close friends when I look at the sentiments that they keep expressing that he's had for her. And then looking at how she's reacting to him, it's really, really interesting. So it seems like there was definitely a real friendship there in some way or capacity. And it's just a shame how you can go from one extreme to the other one, especially when you're willing to hurt your friends, when you know as a friend, if you have a friend that's dealt with a disability or a friend that's from an alternative community such as theirs or something like that, you know it's societal struggles that they have to deal with. And when you're friends with these people, you have I feel like you have a duty once you take on that friendship of a different level of empathy and sympathy and compassion for what they're going through. Because, I mean, you care about your friends, right? And especially when you know your friends are living in extenuating circumstances. And so when you become a lawmaker on the grand stage, the biggest stage out here, you got to answer for that when you start going against who you came up with. Like the old saying goes, you may skip people on the way up and you'll hit all them people on the way down. So you can't just forget about where you come from.
So, when you think about that, what does that say about the person that you knew and the support that he I don't know, was it explicit or implicitly gave to members of the LGBT community?
Well, again, the JD Vance that I was friends with, he might not have always agreed with me. We certainly, again, had our differences. And I didn't always agree with him, but we knew how to talk to each other respectfully with kindness and compassion. We were both raised in the Midwest. I'm from a small town in West Michigan, and I was taught we treat others how we want to be treated. And so you don't have to share a faith or a racial background or a political background with your neighbors to treat them with respect and dignity. And JD reflected that in our relationship. And, the JD Vance that I knew was supportive of marriage equality and had LGBTQ friends, myself included. And when I had gender affirming surgery in 2012, JD, delivered me baked goods when I was going through my recovery. Again, he didn't
See, you know what I'm saying? They was real friends. He delivered baked goods. JD was baking cookies for her and shit. I mean, come on, JD. And now you're not cool with it, man. And you wanna propose laws and stuff to stay out of that community's business. If you consider yourself a real conservative, and if you're a real conservative, keep that same energy from back then that you're supposed to keep now. You can't flip flop. I get the conservative position. I totally get it. All I'm saying is keep that same energy. Don't get the going back and forth, because now how can the party trust you? How can they support what you're saying if you feeling one way on this day and one way on another day? This ain't about picking shoes if you want if you want pancakes today or if you want French toast tomorrow. This is about people's lives here. So whatever stance you want to stand on, the good, the bad, and the ugly, you need to stand on it and keep that same energy the whole time. Don't be going back and forth, man.
necessarily fully understand a transgender identity, and that's fine. I don't need everyone to do that. What I need from people is a sense of decency and respect, which is, consistent with the Midwestern values that I was raised with and why I returned to the Midwest. I've lived here since 2013. This is where I was raised. And the Rust Belt is filled with a diverse group of working class people who, again, we don't always agree on tax policy, on whether we're cat or dog people, but we know how to treat everyone with kindness.
And so when you talk about that he brought you baked goods when you went through gender affirming surgery, and I know, Sophia, you're saying that was 2012. So then you had a long time of being friends. My understanding is when Vance came out in support of a state law banning gender affirming care in 2021, which is when he did that. And he's now since proposed a national ban. He's called that surgery that you went through gruesome. Can you share with us how you ended the friendship with him?
I mean, I never explicitly said we're not friends anymore. And I want to be clear, I still care about JD and Usha and their family. And I
believe Usha is JD Vance's wife.
Down, part of me is hopeful that he'll snap out of it or something. I don't know. But that was incredibly hurtful. And I communicated that to him. I communicated that I was disappointed, that I was hurt, and that I was scared, because I remember what it's like to be a kid and think there's something wrong with me, and it's terribly scary. And I thought, I'm never going to be able to be my authentic self because it won't be safe. I won't be accepted. I won't be able to get a job. And I tried to explain that to him. I told him what I went through as a child in response to his public support of criminalizing access to gender affirming care. And he was very dismissive. And again, the tone that I had, been the basis of our friendship across political differences had completely shifted. He had gone from a compassionate, thoughtful, kind person to mimicking Donald Trump's derisive cruelty. And, I have many family members and friends who are independents, who are Republicans. But here in the Rust Belt, we treat everyone with kindness. And that's just, I think, a core value. And it's a core value that JD Vance has turned his back on in order to amass money and power.
So you mentioned the family and that you wish JD and Usha well. I know you know her well. You attended their wedding, right? She was that super smart person he's referring to in the book. She was once a registered Democrat, recently worked at a San Francisco law firm, as you well know, Sophia, that describes its culture as, quote, radically progressive. She did clerk, though, for more conservative Supreme Court justices. I mean, there's just so many people who are so curious about her and who she really is and what she really thinks. And she's being subjected to all the things women are subjected to, you know, whether she colors her hair and her makeup and all those things that people do. What can you tell us about her? Do you think she believes in what her husband is currently saying?
Well, I don't think anyone knows what JD or Usha believe, because they have literally changed their principles on every imaginable issue.
Wow. Now that's a big statement. That's a big statement. Big statement Sophia just made, that they've changed their views on every issue. I mean, some stuff's got to remain true. I get growth. We all go through growth. We all need to strive for growing. And as you grow, things change about yourself, your appearance, your mind state, your spiritual state, and all of that stuff. But the direction you're growing in should remain the same. And you know, everything about you shouldn't change. Not everything, maybe some things. But when you stepping out here on the level that he's stepping out here, some stuff shouldn't be changing, because it's not about what really is, it's about how it looks. You're subjugating. I think that's the right word for this. Subjugating. Roll with me on this if that's the right word. You're subjugating. All right. You're putting yourself out there to be indicted by the court of public opinion. And so when you do that, you got to understand people gonna hit you with stuff. And so the best move for yourself and the people is remain consistent on your core issues. And as a conservative, this is a core issue: how you feel about reproductive rights, how you feel about gender assigning, how you feel about the LGBT community, how you feel about religion. These are core things. Right, wrong, or indifferent, your stance needs to be the same, so people know who they're supporting, who they're voting for.
However, I was never as close with Usha as I was with JD. I will say that the woman that I knew was also incredibly kind and brilliant, a really hard worker, and someone I understood to be kind of a centrist technocrat, and leaning left of center, I would say. Someone who, it's come out publicly, was very upset and frightened by the events of January 6th, as was JD at the time. And so what I think is reflected in both of their changing of their principles on every single issue is that their core value is amassing money and power, not the integrity and kindness that I think are core values of everyone in the Rust Belt.
Sophia, thank you very much for sharing all of this with us. I know you did it after great consideration, and I appreciate it. I know everyone watching does too, so thanks.
This was really an eye-opening interview that was done, because we need to know where you're coming from, JD, because a lot of people were shocked when JD Vance was picked in the first place, because they were saying, wasn't this the guy who was a big Trump critic? Didn't he have a lot to say about how the Republican Party was doing things? Not necessarily about him being a Republican, but more so him being so critical of Donald Trump in the way the GOP is moving since Donald Trump has become the leader of that party. And so for him to be right there on the ticket all of a sudden, it just got a little confusing to the base. And that's so not fair to Republicans or Democrats or independents, whoever, because it is so important for candidates who are running, whether it's Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Donald Trump, JD Vance, whoever it may be, to be clear on your issues and not flip-flop, because we need to know, okay, this is what you stand for, this is what you own, this is what you don't stand for, this ain't what you own. Okay, I want to vote for you, and no, I don't want to vote for you. And I don't think we should take it personal, really, how these people feel, but we just need to take note of it so that we know who to align ourselves with, because of course we want to vote for like-minded individuals. There are people who are going to be for the things that Sophie stands for, and there's going to be people who are totally against it. That's fine, but we need to be clear on who these people are so we know, okay, let me stand next to the people who don't agree, or let me stand next to the people who do agree. But if you agree one moment and then don't agree the next moment, and now we supporting you thinking you agree to something that we agree with, and you done switched it up, that makes us look crazy, and that just threw our vote down the toilet. That's not fair. That's not fair to none of us. So, JD, I'm not sure what you're doing, and this says a lot, and I hope you ain't hurt your friend like that. If that's how you felt then, that's how you should feel now. If you feel something different, you stand on it. What I hate to see that will make this even worse is if you change your mind. So let's say you don't feel this way no more. And now, meaning you don't feel the way you felt when you were writing the letters to her and delivering her baked goods and cook cakes and brownies for her and all that kind of stuff. Let's say you feel something different now. Don't go back. Like, stand in one place so we know what we're doing when we're evaluating the ticket that you want. It makes everybody look crazy. All right, this done went long enough. This was a great interview, and it's a great topic for discussion. I would love to hear what you all got to say about it, because I know some people are with this, some people are totally against it. I get it. It's that complicated. Like, share, subscribe, put your comments down there, and let's talk about it, all right? All right, in the meantime, don't forget, stay unlikely, be unstoppable. And I'm going to catch you on the next one. We got a whole lot to talk about.